Hello, my name is NJ Franco, and this is my defense to the Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero. So, I somewhat recently finished reading The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan, and I posted a review on it on my channel. And shortly after posting my review, maybe a week or so later, I started to realize that there are some Rick Riordan fans who are not a fan of The Lost Hero, primarily because there's no Percy Jackson in it. I mean, he's referenced, don't get me wrong, but he's not really in the story. And I get that, okay? Because Percy Jackson is just such a big part of the Rick Riordan universe. In fact, I recently bought the Kane Chronicles, and I'm still counting that as part of my Percy Jackson collection. Even though I'm pretty sure Percy Jackson's nowhere in the Kane Chronicles, pretty much at this point, anything Rick Riordan writes in that universe, we just consider Percy Jackson to be a part of it, even if he literally isn't. So I get it. Percy Jackson's not a part of The Lost Hero, and people aren't happy about it. I get it. But here's why I think The Lost Hero is still a decent book. It is not the best book by Rick Riordan, in my opinion. That book goes to The Sea of Monsters, book two in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, but Lost Hero still isn't that bad of a book, and here's why. Okay, one, it's a sequel series. Now, Rick Riordan very well could have written Percy Jackson and the Olympians, had this super successful, one-off book series, and then just called it quits if he wanted to. But he decided not to. He decided that he wanted to write more and write sequels to it. Now, I do know that there is a bit of a running joke with, Rick Riordan fans going, oh, he's written 40,000, books, which isn't true, but he's written a lot of books, okay? So I know that, but my point still is he could have written Percy Jackson and the Olympians and then just called it quits, but he knew that he had a fan base and, he wanted to give more to that fan base and expand on his universe more, so he decided to write a sequel series and then other series after that and other spin-offs and so on and so forth. But he decided to write more because he had fans that wanted that. Two, Rick Riordan introduced more of the Greek gods that weren't even mentioned in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And me personally, that is one of my favorite things about the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series is learning about all the different Greek gods. Okay, so not only does Rick Riordan, essentially teach, because I feel like I'm learning about Greek gods here. Not only does he introduce more of the Greek gods in this sequel series, like the god Hypno, the god of sleep, which I didn't even know there was a god of sleep. But he also then introduced some of the Roman gods. Okay, so it's like Greek gods and Roman gods. This is so awesome, for me learning about all these different gods. I'm loving it, and talking about how they relate to each other. How like Zeus and Jupiter and Vulcan and Hephaestus, how they're all so far as I know, all the Greek gods and Roman gods are counterparts to each other. So learning about all these gods, I'm loving that. Getting more gods introduced, huge win for me. Three, on the note of being having more gods introduced, you learn more about the different cabins and you get more in-depth look at many of the different cabins, not just the cabins of the new gods introduced like Hypno, but also cabins like Hephaestus. I don't really, in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, I don't really remember him going too much into detail about the Hephaestus cabin, but in Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero, you go inside the Hephaestus cabin, you see their beds, which I'm, like I said in my book review, mad jealous of their beds because they got like a stereo and a refrigerator, all kinds of electronics, and you can go into this little hidey hole and stuff like that. Jealous of their beds. But you go to the Hephaestus cabin, you go into the Zeus cabin. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think at one point you even go into Hera's cabin. She doesn't have any children because she's actually faithful, to her husband. But she has an honorary cabin even if she doesn't have any children. So yeah, you get to have more of an in-depth look into all the different cabins. Also, Aphrodite, I already knew that her cabin was basically if Tommy Hilfiger and Barbie like threw up on each other and exploded and there's perfume and shit everywhere. But you actually get to go inside and see more of what that's like and how, oh my god, pink and glittery and whatever that cabin is. So yeah, you get a more in-depth look into some of the cabins that he didn't have a chance to talk about in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Point number four, kind of a quick one, but even though there's no Percy Jackson in this Percy Jackson series, many of the characters from Percy Jackson and the Olympians do make a return in The Lost Hero. such as Kyron, Annabeth, Rachel Elizabeth Dare. So, still got a lot of those characters that we love from the first series. Continuing on in at least the first book, as far as I know, in this sequel series. All right, point number 5, my final point. So, as far as Heroes of Olympus goes, I've only read The Lost Hero. I haven't read the rest of the books in that series yet, but it would seem to me, at least based off of how The Lost Hero ended, it would seem that Percy Jackson is going to be playing a much bigger role in the Heroes of Olympus. I don't know yet. I haven't read them. I haven't even started Son of Neptune yet, but it would seem that he's going to play a much bigger role. He might not be the main focus. It might still be Jason, Piper, and Leo, but it would seem he's going to be playing a much bigger role. And if that's the case, then this book, The Lost Hero, would have been needed to set up that situation for Percy Jackson to be reintroduced into the story to continue on his own story. So I can't say this is what Rick Royden was thinking, but this is kind of the way I'm looking at it is, possibly Rick Royden was like, hey, you want more Percy Jackson? I can give you more Percy Jackson, but first you're going to have to go through The Lost Hero. You're going to have to go through this book to get more Percy Jackson. And yes, I'll admit that it's possible that Rick Royden could have written a sequel series where Percy Jackson was introduced from the beginning and he was front and center again. But, that probably, it would seem to me, that would just involve Percy Jackson and Annabeth and Grover and whoever else going on another quest again. And that's been done. He did that for a whole series, of him just, going on quests and whatnot. So he wanted to mix it up and think of a different way of doing things. And the only way he could think to do that was to have this one book set up a new situation for Percy Jackson to be in. So I don't know. That's the way it seems to me. Like I said, I haven't finished the series yet. I've only read book 1, but I'm going to be finishing that series. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I want to know what you think. If you're kind of like, hey, dude, you've only read book 1. What the hell do you know? Just shut up. Why am I even, listening to you? Whatever. If you have any comments or thoughts or whatever, if I'm wrong, please by all means comment below. But after reading book 1, like I said, I don't think it's that bad of a book. Yes, Percy Jackson isn't in it, but it's still a great book, in my opinion. Anyway, that's it for me. And as always, thank you for watching.